Attention, please.
And now, it's Cutter's Rockcast.
You know, doing my podcast, Cutter's Rockcast, we talk to a lot of modern musicians, but every so often we get to dig back in history, which I personally love because I love the history of rock and roll music. And sometimes we get a legend. And I just had one of those pinch myself moments a little bit ago when I realized I was going to talk to Edgar Winter. Edgar Winter is here. How are you, my friend?
I'm ready to rock and roll.
That's good.
There you go.
You know, growing up, I always felt a little bit of a kingship with you because when I was coming up and decided to do music and get into radio, I was a guitar player and I was being taught how to play guitar by two different jazz musicians. But I wanted to play punk rock and heavy metal music really bad. 80s, 90s, that was my thing, you know. And but I always loved jazz and blues, and it felt like you and your brother Johnny, your music, and I don't know, somebody gave me a Johnny Winter record once, and I just kind of fell in love with it. But had that sort of, hey, here's some blues, here's some jazz influence stuff, but oh, it's good to rock too. So it's pretty cool that all these years later, you know, here you are. Obviously, we lost Johnny a few years ago, but here you are still doing it. And this Brother Johnny record is cool. It sounds amazing.
Well, thank you. I'm sure Ross Hogarth, the engineer and mixer, will also thank you. Yeah. But, you know, it was just, you know, I could talk about it for hours and it's difficult to even know where to start. But I'd like to begin thanking my wife, my lovely wife, Monique, to whom I've been happily and blissfully married now for 43 years.
Oh, that's amazing.
For rock and rollers, and in California, no less.
Right.
But, you know, I was undecided about making this record in the very beginning. First of all, it was such a shock when Johnny passed away. We had a tour already booked that we were going to play with our respective bands. And I was just devastated. And shortly after that, there was a lot of interest and I started to get offers from various record companies. And they just felt like deal offers to me. They'd ask questions like, how long is it going to take? And what guest artists can you guarantee? And you know, I said, well, I don't know. I'm not even certain that I want to do this, and I definitely don't have a blueprint in my head as to how that would even come about. But it just felt like business people sensing of an opportunity. And it was just more exploitation of Johnny's name and memory to sell a few records, which was not something that I had any interest in or wanted to be a part of. Plus the fact that, as I said, I was just devastated and not emotionally equipped or ready to even think about making an album.
So that conversation happened, like, I mean, right after his death, or
within say a couple of months.
Geez, let a guy mourn a little.
Yeah, that's what you'd think. But as years passed, I came around to realizing that it was really Johnny's true, loyal, and devoted fans that wanted to see this happen. And it got to feel like the universe was crying out for this record. And the reason that I want to thank my wife, Monique, is that I sometimes trust her intuition more than my analytical thinking about what I should do next. And when I asked her, she was very definite. She said, well, of course. He said, you always talk about how Johnny is your all-time musical hero and you wouldn't be where you are today were it not for him. And this is the perfect opportunity for you to demonstrate and acknowledge that. And you owe it to yourself, to Johnny, and to the world to do this record. And she couldn't have been more right, in every respect with regard to that. And the thing about, like, I had to have Monique's support and encouragement and inspiration. Otherwise, this record just, I never would have undertaken it, because I knew it was going to be emotionally, like, if not difficult, it was just going to be highly emotional. It was going to bring up all these childhood memories. And I also knew that it was going to take a long time. And I finally decided to make the record after meeting Bruce Quarto, who is the president of Quarto Valley Records. And Bruce wanted to do the record for all the right reasons. He loved Johnny's music. He was, really familiar with it. And he wanted to bring that to the world. And he said, I don't care how long it takes or how you want to make it. I leave all of that up to you. And when I heard that, I said, okay, this is starting to make sense. And
so when did the plan kind of start coming together? When did that happen? I mean, we were talking a few years after, like, are we talking 18?
Well,
19? Like
4 years,
Okay.
about 4 years after Johnny's passing. I first enlisted the help of my dear friend Ross Hogarth, who I worked with on my last album, Rebel Road, and he just saved that project at the end. He was not the engineer, but came in to mix that record. And he did such a great job that I said, I'm never going to work with another mixer for the rest of my life. We just had an immediate kinship in terms of the feeling for music. And I just couldn't, this would not have been the record it is without Ross. And Ross started out just as, I wanted him to mix the record, and I asked if he would do that. And he said, yeah, but I want to engineer it. If I'm going to mix it, I want to be the person who has recorded it, instead of finding all kinds of problems that I'm going to have to try to correct in the mix.
Makes sense.
And he brought, first of all, he had so many great ideas with regard to the material, and he suggested so many artists that I never would have thought of. Just for example, he suggested John McPhee to do, of the Doobie Brothers, to do the slide on Highway 61. And I had forgotten about all that great slide work on the early Doobies records. That was a great call. Phil X, who is with my Bon Jovi, he replaced Richie Sambora. Just a madman on the guitars, Canadian, and a guy that I wasn't that familiar with, and he's a great singer too. So we got him like doing a lot of background vocals as well. Doyle Bramhall Jr., who I knew of as playing with Eric Clapton, being Eric's second guitarist, but I had no idea that he was such a great acoustic slide player, and was really understood that traditional, authentic Delta blues, which was one of the things that Johnny was so amazing at. I think that's one of the things that really separated Johnny from a lot of guitar players, with that knowledge and ability to play that.
Dude, that slide guitar is underrated though. I played a bar gig the other night, and I pulled out somebody's beer bottle and started doing it, and I forgot that people get so amazed by it, but I'm like, oh man, this really sounds cool. I really need to get a new slide. So it's funny you brought that up. But it is, man, that's a talent that's really has gone away from the world.
Yeah, it is a dying art, and very few people, black or white, really get into it. And as I said, I think that's let's see, also David Grissom, who is a guy I didn't even know of, and he's a fellow Texan, And Ross had told me from the very beginning, he said, any of these songs we're talking about, if you got David, he would do it with the feel and the authenticity that you'd want to hear. And I mean, he was right, totally right about that. And David played he played the whole body of I'm Yours and I'm Hers, that of course has Billy Gibbons and Derek Trucks on it. But he played all of throughout that song, and then he did all the guitar work on Johnny Be Good, which I had originally thought I would get Joe Walsh to play, and I got Joe to sing it. I was able to talk him into that. I was able to get that far, but he, I always think of like Joe and I go way back to when he was in the James Gang, and
Sure.
we played a bunch of shows together. And I really think of Joe as a rocker. So I didn't. I asked everybody what song they would like to do. I had a long song list, and I didn't want anybody on the record to do anything that they didn't feel passionately about playing and that they didn't feel a personal connection with. So when I asked Joe, I said, well, what do you think about Johnny Be Good? I thought he'd pick something like that, or maybe Jumping Jack Flash. And we started listening to tracks, and he picked the song Stranger, which is a beautiful ballad, very uncharacteristic of anything that Johnny would normally write. And it has a beautiful sensitivity and vulnerability that Johnny doesn't usually display. So anyway, I said,
well, on how about, because you just brought up Stranger, you have, I mean, Joe Walsh, but Ringo Starr as well. Like that's like the ultimate super group of ever. Michael McDonald.
Yeah, well, that's a perfect example of how this album came together, which is really a lot. It was just an organic, it really took on a life of its own, and there was nothing planned out about it. When like Joe finally agreed to sing Johnny Be Good, so I went over to his place. He's got a beautiful studio, and we had our arms around, go, go, Johnny, go. And we were like just singing, and then I got him to sing the second verse. And then when he agreed to do Stranger, I was so surprised, and he put this beautiful solo on, and I had been thinking about Ringo Starr, and I just thought, if there's any way I could get Ringo to play on one of these tracks, first of all, what would it be? And I don't think he plays on that many people's songs. So I didn't expect him to do it, but I don't know if you're aware of this, but Ringo is married to the lovely Barbara Bach, and Barbara's sister, Marjorie, is married to Joe Walsh, making them brothers-in-law.
My co-host on my morning show, the Rick and Cutter Show, and I were just talking about this like 2 weeks ago, because we found, I don't know if we found a picture of the four of them together, and it's like, wow.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, it exists, but you see a picture of the four of them, it's like, okay, guys.
So I thought, well, if I got Joe on here, maybe that would be the inducement, would help me talk Ringo into it. So I thought about it and agonized over it for weeks. Finally, I got the nerve to pick up the phone, and I told him about the whole project, and he said, Edgar, I'll do it for you. And it just touched my heart. It was
That's awesome.
So after that had happened, my wife Monique and I were just sitting around listening to some of the tracks, and I had a scratch vocal on there, which was good. It sounded a lot like Johnny, which I don't try to do, but I really can't help sounding like Johnny. We're brothers, and we just, when I do my gravelly voice, it just sounds a whole lot like him. But anyway, we were listening to the song, and out of the blue, Monique said, Michael McDonald's voice would sound great on here. And as soon as she said it, I just could hear it like,
Yeah.
hello, pretty stranger. You know, that haunting. Nobody sounds like Michael. He's just instantaneously recognizable. And so I didn't Michael and I were good friends and worked together back in the mid 80s. And that's with another a time in my life that I'll always remember. I just got a call out of the blue from Michael, and I didn't even know he knew who I was or anything about my music, and invited me to play on his first solo album and be part of the first solo band after the Doobies. And it was a great band with Robin Ford on guitar, Willie Weeks on bass. And I thought he had moved to Hawaii, so I thought he was still in Maui, but Ross knew exactly where he was. He was back in Santa Barbara, and it was just such a great feeling having Michael on this, because I had played on his early first record, and it just felt like full circle. Now,
Yeah,
he's on something of mine, and you're absolutely right. When you look at that, like Michael McDonald, Joe Walsh, and Ringo Starr, it's just such an interesting array of people that you probably wouldn't even expect to be on the same album, much less the same song.
Right. Oh, that's amazing. So, okay, there's 16 songs in the album, Brother Johnny, but how did you come up with the actual list of songs that you want? Like, before you ever even talked to a guest, before you talked to any friends, like, how did you know what songs you wanted to do? I can't imagine that was a easy process to go through.
It wasn't really difficult. Well, first of all, welcome to Winterland here. This is where Brother Johnny, I'll say it's it's the womb in which Brother Johnny was conceived. And here's my trusty vocal mic. I sang every word of the album on that, and played the original piano parts here. But there were certain songs that I just knew had to be on, like Rock and Roll Hoochie Coo, Still Alive and Well. Those were I'd said, well, those are obvious things that have to be there. Then there were all of these.
Well, and you just mentioned those too. I mean, those were obviously Rick Derringer songs. Your brother Johnny was playing with that, or playing with Rick. And Rock and Roll Hoochie Coo is still a staple. I mean, on every classic classic hits radio station that exists in the world. But Johnny was of course played on those songs originally.
Yeah. And then there were all of these songs that cover songs that Johnny had become really closely identified with, like Highway 61 was really like a slide vehicle, and Jumpin' Jack Flash. Like, Johnny loved the Stones just because of their bluesiness, and he loved Dylan, that whole mystique, and those had to be there. Then there were songs that like the early songs that Johnny wrote, like Meantown Blues and I'm Yours and I'm Hers, that really exemplify Johnny's style, and I think one of his major contributions that he doesn't receive enough credit for, which is the fusion of blues and rock. And the reason I say that is because there are hundreds of great electric blues guitarists, but like, you take somebody like Stevie Ray, most of the people that are blues rockers, it's more contemporary blues. And Johnny's fusion, like, I remember the first time I heard Meantown, I said, wow, it sounds like an old, like one of those old traditional Delta like one of those acoustic riffs, like a John Lee Hooker, dun, 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 dun.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
it's got this electric, high intensity, electric rock drive. How did he do that?
yeah. Crank the gain up.
And yeah, so that's that fusion of early, like using those old authentic blues riffs and putting them into a rock context. So I said those songs have to be there, and uh, then the first question in my mind with regard to the material was, do I want this to be just a straight ahead blues record, paying tribute to the great legacy that Johnny left the world, or should it be more of a personal tribute from me to my brother based on my own particular favorites and songs that I loved, songs like Stranger and Self-Destructive Blues, that are sort of more obscure Johnny songs that you might not necessarily expect to be on. And I just felt like it should be a balance of both, which is what I tried to do. And I don't think, if I had done just a straight ahead blues record, like I'm not really particularly a fan of tribute albums in general, because like I feel like a lot of times they're just sort of sound-alike albums or copy albums. And
Well,
like
here's a
like
bunch of big name bands or artists covering this other big band with some songs, probably.
yeah,
I mean, that's
it's
how
like I love Ray Charles, but if I want to hear Ray Charles, I'll listen to Ray. And why would I want to hear a bunch of people trying to sound like him?
I think there's a couple cover records out there that exist, tribute albums that exist that are really good and really well done, but it's the ones that have something different to offer. Even in my own mind, thinking back to like the Black Sabbath tribute record that came out in the mid 90s, it was all these bands from that era doing something different to the songs, doing it in their
Yeah,
own ways. And I think that's why that worked. And then you have something like there was a Zeppelin tribute record that I know came out when I was younger that didn't have that same vibe to it, because it was just those bands doing the Zeppelin songs the way Zeppelin did them. Not that it's easy to change Zeppelin, because it's not, but still,
hmm
I think that's what you get. And yeah, hearing all these people do these songs, it's pretty incredible. It's pretty incredible.
Well,
It's an
yeah.
incredible.
My point is, when you were asking about the material, was just that there were certain, like, all of these songs that I loved and felt like had to be on, and there are many, many more songs. There are 17 songs on there, but I these are the ones that I felt, and it's also a combination of the songs that the artist chose. Like when I went to uh, Joe Bonamassa, and we were going over a song list, uh, and when I got to Self-Destructive Blues, he said, "Oh wow, you're really gonna do Self-Destructive? That's the first Johnny Winter song I ever learned, and I played that with my band." He was just flipping out. He got so excited.
That's
It
awesome.
wasn't a song that he thought would have ended up on there. And so he came in like with a Firebird and an old Bassman amp, like the same rig Johnny would have used. And man, when I like I've said, like, I didn't ask anybody to try to play like or sound like Johnny. My idea in doing the record was to not just get the usual suspects, but get an interesting array, like a cast of characters, and get all great artists and have them do their take on Johnny's music, to let them try to choose a song, and a song that they had some personal connection with and a passion for, and do it, in whatever way that their heart would dictate. And that's like, I really feel like there was such an outpouring of love and respect for Johnny, and there's such heartfelt guest performances, and the album wouldn't be what it is without them. And I've already mentioned Ross. Another thing Ross did is, like, when we were, toward the end of the project, and he said, we don't have any Muddy on here. And I said, oh, wow, you're right. How could I have not realized, not thought of that? Because Johnny he idolized Muddy, and I think high point of his career was getting to meet Muddy, play with him, and produce Hard Again, and the albums that they did together. And I said, yeah, you're right. We absolutely have to have something. And then I thought, like, Hard Again, Mannish Boy is the killer track on there, but there's no way you're going to touch that. And I thought, well, Muddy, his anthem is Mojo Working, and I said, that's a song. And that's a song that Johnny and I played together as kids. And that's a case like this music. This is the music that I grew up on. It's like Johnny and I were inseparable as kids. We started out playing ukulele, singing Everly Brothers songs, and then Johnny graduated to guitar, and it became evident that, he just took to that. That was his axe. And so I just said, well, I'll play everything else. So I switched to bass for a while, and then I played drums and keyboards, and then got into sax, got into jazz, and I played a little trumpet, trombone, clarinet, flute. I just wanted to familiarize myself with all the instruments. But anyway, that when after we figured that we were going to do Mojo, then it was like, well, who's gonna do that? And the president of the record company, Bruce Quarto, came up with the idea of Bobby Rush, and also Ross knew Bobby, and I said, oh yeah, he's like, I always thought of him as one of these Chicago guys, like along with Muddy and Little Walter and Willie Dixon and Buddy Guy. I didn't realize that he's from Louisiana, which is my old stomping ground. Growing up in Texas, it's right next to Louisiana. I probably played more in Louisiana than I did in Texas. Same thing with Kenny Wayne Shepherd. I didn't know Kenny was from Louisiana.
Oh yeah.
And I said, oh, no wonder I love his playing so much. From my same neck of the woods. So all of these things, like, then when Bobby Rush came in, like, I didn't know that he and Johnny were really close. He started telling me all these stories about festivals that they'd played together. And he was the guy who introduced Johnny to Muddy when Johnny went up to Chicago.
No kidding.
And I had, like,
wow,
and man, he got like the old bullet mic and the little amp, to store it, and got it. Man, when he started doing Mojo, like, I just couldn't believe it. He's like in his mid 80s, and he sounds like a blues guy, like in his prime, and he just killed it. And
once you got it though, you got it. What about those? And I gotta mention this because and I'd be remiss if I didn't. Taylor Hawkins is on this record. And of course we just lost him recently.
yes,
On the song "Guess It'll Go Away." Him and Doug Rappaport do that song. Talk to me about that particular song and getting those guys to do it.
well, once again, this was Ross's suggestion.
Okay.
And how it came about was, first of all, the song "Guess I'll Go Away." It's sort of a cautionary. It's well, I guess you'd say the lure of sex, danger of drugs, and love of rock and roll. But it's sort of a sex, drugs, rock and roll song. but Johnny wrote it just as he was going away to rehab, for the first time. And a lot of Johnny's songs just sound like a relationship, a girl song, but in a lot of cases they aren't. There's a subtext behind them.
That's the
But
way the blues. That's the way the blues was. I mean, it
yeah,
sounded like "Baby Don't Leave Me," but really, we're talking about a protest song about a worker strike. It's
exactly.
crazy.
That kind of thing throughout, like, or I'm yours and I'm hers, and like now we're getting off the subject, but we're
Okay, sure,
talking
go.
about because I'll do that. You have to
I
rein
will
me
too.
in because uh I get far afield here. But we're talking what were we talking
The
about? Oh,
song got so
about
COVID
Taylor,
with
about
Taylor
Taylor.
Hawkins and yeah.
So okay, so I feel like that to me is another unusual song for Johnny. Like most of the songs are like bluesy rock. They're more rock and roll, but uh guess I'll go away rocks. I mean, it's hard rock. It rocks
Yeah,
like Van
very much.
Halen or Foo Fighters. And I felt like it should, for the vocal, it should have, rather than a bluesy vocal, that it should have a more modern approach. And then Ross said, well, how about Taylor Hawkins? And oh man, Foo Fighters. I said, yeah, that would be perfect. And I'd never met Taylor. And when he came in, what just struck and impressed me so deeply was just his enthusiasm, love, and focus. Like, I tried to engage him in a business discussion, but as we were getting started, and he just would not hear of it. He said, "Look," said, "I love Johnny. I love this song. I feel a really personal connection with this song. I don't want anything for doing this. I just want to get out there and rock." And man, rock he did.
Sure did.
And uh and I just like the fact that he's doing a tribute song, about on this particular subject, Johnny having passed away on the road in his sleep in a hotel room. And then after doing this song, Taylor passes on in just almost identical circumstances. So it's so similar, and it's so ironic and strange. And this whole album was like that. It seemed to have a sense of destiny about it, and just things coming together, just a whole confluence of unrelated things, coming together. But when I hear that song, I just uh, it saddens me that I never got to know Taylor and could find a way to thank him properly, as he so much deserved for doing that song, because he really did it. He really did it out of love. And he seemed like a great guy. That's all I can say.
And from every story I've ever heard, I met him once briefly in passing, but every story I've ever heard has been the same about how great of a guy he was. Listen, Brother Johnny is available, of course, everywhere. It's an incredible listen. Blues rock, from the ballad. There's a song that you do on your own called Drown in My Own Tears. Everyone else has a guest, of course, and I imagine that's a very personal thing, but we are running out of time. Edgar
Yeah.
Winter, Brother Johnny again is the album. Thank you so much for this conversation. I really, really appreciate it.
Well, you're most welcome. I want to thank Kebmo for transforming the song that I wrote for Johnny, Lone Star Blues. And you're right about Drown in My Own Tears. As I had said, I love Ray, and Johnny did that song on his first record. And when I did it on this record, it was like I really felt like I was singing it back to him the way he sang it to me so many years ago when he was so young and vital. And I also felt like I was singing it for my parents and all my bandmates. I'm the last surviving member of the Edgar Winter group. Dan Hartman, Chuck Ruff, Ronnie Montrose are gone. Uh, you know, Jerry LaCroix, the lead singer in White Trash, and Bobby Ramirez, the drummer. I was doing that song for them. And, I cried during that song, but it was such a beautiful feeling at the end of it, this just sense of serenity and peace and healing. And the whole album was like that for me. And it was very cathartic and a beautiful experience. It's not the record Johnny would have done, but I think it's the record he would have wanted me to do for him. And so I'd just like to thank all of our fans who followed my career throughout all of these years, as well as Johnny's. And we love you all, could never do it without you. And it's meant the world to us to be able to do what we most love and see you all out there rocking and having a great time. So hope I'll see you out on the road with Ringo and his all-star band next summer, and get ready to rock and roll.
I love it. Edgar Winter, thank you so much. Seriously, this has been a pleasure for me.
Well, same here, Cutter. I always enjoy talking to people that knows a little something of, musicians. To me, that's really what it's all about. And the other thing about this album, I miss groups. I miss bands. To me, I wanted to make an album that sounded like a band, not just like I hear so much music. There's a lot of great music still around, but to me, a lot of times it just sounds like guys playing parts instead of guys playing like they're in a band.
Oh, there's something special about it. It's a special feeling. It just doesn't.
So anyway, thanks again.
You got it. Take
Peace
care.
and love.
Cutter's Rockcast.
Don't forget to tune in. Exactly.